I didn't plan to ruin my son's wedding. I planned to watch him ruin his own life, but quietly, from a distance. That was before I found the second bank notice stuffed behind the couch cushions in my living room, along with a letter from a woman I'd never met, signed with the words, "Tell your fiancé, or I will." That was 3 weeks before the ceremony. For a long time, I'd suspected Mark was reckless with money. Gambling debts, failed investments, borrowing from friends he never paid back, none of it was new. But this time, the numbers were bigger. I'm not talking about a few thousand. I'm talking about figures with 6 zeros. And the name on the letter, Laura, wasn't just an old friend. She was one of 2 women he'd been seeing while dating Claire. Claire, the woman who thought she was marrying a devoted, responsible man. I could have stayed silent. Pretended I didn't see the warning signs. Let him charm his way out of trouble like he always did. But then, 3 days before the wedding, he came to me asking for, just a small loan, to cover some wedding expenses. That's when I knew. He wasn't just lying to Claire. He was about to drag her into a financial pit so deep she'd never climb out. I called him into my study that night. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice steady, "does Claire know?" He didn't even ask what I meant. He just smirked, leaned against the doorframe, and said, "She doesn't need to. Once we're married, it's our money. I'll figure it out." I didn't respond. I just nodded, as if I agreed. Inside, I was making a decision. Not an impulsive one, no, this would be measured, deliberate, and final. 2 days later, I prepared a single, neat envelope. Bank statements, legal notices, Laura's letter. I added a photo, him with Laura, taken just 6 months ago, time-stamped for proof. I sealed it and kept it in my jacket pocket. On the morning of the wedding, I shook his hand. "You look good, son," I told him. And he did, in his tailored suit, grinning like the world belonged to him. He didn't notice the way I looked at Claire when she walked in, radiant in white, her smile untainted by what she didn't yet know. When the coordinator came to escort her to the aisle, I stepped forward. "Claire," I said, my voice low enough for no one else to hear, "I have something you need to read before you take another step." Her smile faltered. "What is it?" I handed her the envelope. "The truth." She hesitated, eyes darting toward the music already starting in the hall. Then she broke the seal. What she saw in that envelope, that was the moment the wedding stopped being a wedding. And the moment my son's life started to come apart. Claire didn't speak while she read. Her fingers tightened on the papers as her eyes scanned each page, her breath coming faster. When she reached the photograph, she stopped completely, staring at it as if she could burn a hole through the image. I watched her jaw clench, the muscles in her face shifting from disbelief to something sharper. When she finally looked up at me, the warmth in her eyes was gone. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough," I said. No apology. No excuses. She glanced toward the ballroom doors, where the music was swelling, the guests already standing. Her friends and family sat expectantly, phones ready, waiting to record the perfect walk down the aisle. She turned back to me. "Why tell me now?" "Because," I said, "once you take that walk, his debts are yours. His lies are yours. And the man you think you're marrying will spend the rest of his life bleeding you dry while smiling in your face." Her grip on the envelope trembled, but not from weakness. From rage. In that moment, I saw her make a decision, the same way I had days earlier. It was a silent agreement between us. This wouldn't be an outburst. It wouldn't be some emotional meltdown in front of an audience. It would be precise. Controlled. Lethal in its timing. She smoothed the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it into her clutch. "Don't say anything," she told me. The music hit its peak. The coordinator, clearly anxious about the delay, gestured for her to step forward. Claire took a deep breath and began her walk, but slower than planned, deliberate, each step calculated. From my seat near the front, I saw the look on Mark's face when he spotted her. Relief, pride, maybe even love. He had no idea the ground under his feet was already splitting open. She reached him at the altar, smiling faintly. To the guests, it was a perfect moment. To me, it was a knife behind the back. When the officiant began his speech, Claire waited, nodding as though everything were normal. But just before the vows, she raised her hand. "I'd like to say something," she announced. Mark looked confused, but stepped back slightly. Claire opened her clutch, pulled out the envelope, and held it up for everyone to see. "This," she said, "is who I was about to marry. And I think everyone here deserves to know." The room fell silent. Cameras lowered. Even the officiant froze. Mark's smile collapsed. And I sat back, knowing this was only the first fracture. The real break was still coming. Mark's first instinct wasn't to apologize, it was to grab the envelope. Claire stepped back, holding it out of reach. "Don't touch me," she said, voice cold enough to cut glass. Then she turned to the crowd. "These are bank records, legal notices, and letters from women my fiancé has been involved with while we were together. Some of you might have loaned him money. If you did, I suggest you check your bank accounts." There was a ripple through the guests, a shifting of bodies, whispered questions, the sound of someone stifling a laugh in the back row. Mark tried to laugh it off. "She's overreacting," he said, raising his hands. "It's not what it looks like. My dad's been feeding her lies." That was my cue to stand. "Actually, Mark," I said, my voice carrying across the room, "those are your own bank statements. They came in the mail. To my house." He turned to me, eyes burning. "You've been going through my stuff?" "No," I replied. It's hard to avoid seeing the truth when it shows up in plain sight. At that moment, Claire's father stood. "Is this true?" he asked Mark directly. Mark hesitated, then tried to pivot. "Look, we're just under a little pressure. Everyone exaggerates things." That hesitation cost him. The room turned against him instantly. The officiant quietly stepped away. The music stopped completely. And in the uneasy silence, I watched every person Mark had ever relied on start pulling away from him. While he sputtered and tried to salvage what was left of his pride, I was already thinking 3 moves ahead. This was no longer about stopping a wedding, it was about dismantling the network that allowed him to operate unchecked. I spent the next day making calls. Friends, business contacts, even the manager at the country club he frequented. I asked questions, never revealing the full story, just enough to open doors. By the end of the week, I had a timeline of his gambling activity, the lenders he'd been dodging, and the overlapping relationships he'd been juggling. The most important discovery? His debts weren't just personal. He'd been using Claire's name, and credit, to secure a private loan she didn't know existed. That wasn't just betrayal. That was criminal. I made copies of everything. Organized them in chronological order. Mark had built his life on people not knowing the full picture. I was going to give them all of it, in the right order, at the right time. When I was done, I poured myself a drink and looked at the neatly stacked folders on my desk. This was no longer damage control. This was preparation for war. The first strike had to look harmless. If Mark saw it coming, he'd go to ground, and all my work would lose momentum. I started with the country club. Mark's reputation there mattered more to him than his own bank account. It was where he made business deals, borrowed money from friends, and kept up the image of a man who had everything under control. I called the club's general manager, Mr. Lang, an old acquaintance. "There's a member you should review," I said. "Mark Weaver. Check his account history." Lang chuckled. "Your boy's always a little late with dues, but he settles eventually." "Not this time," I told him. And if you keep his account active, the club might end up on the list of creditors when his bankruptcy hits. Silence. Then the sound of a pen clicking. I'll take a look. By the end of the day, Mark's club access was temporarily suspended pending account review. No announcement, no scene, just a locked door when he showed up for his Saturday tea time. He called me that afternoon, voice tight with anger. "Did you talk to Lang?" "I might have," I said. "Why?" "They're saying my account's frozen." "I had a meeting there." "Guess you'll have to reschedule." I hung up before he could answer. That same day, I sent an anonymous tip to the lender who had unknowingly issued Claire's fraudulent loan. I didn't accuse, I just provided the paperwork and suggested they confirm the borrower's consent. Within 48 hours, their legal department had opened an internal review. The beauty of the first strike was its subtlety. On the surface, it was just minor inconvenience, a suspended membership, a routine loan verification. But for Mark, both cut deep. The club's social circle was where he borrowed credibility, and the loan probe was a loose thread that could unravel every other financial lie. By Monday, I got confirmation he'd been calling Claire's family non-stop, trying to clarify things. She wasn't answering. Neither were her parents. Word had started to spread, slowly, like a hairline crack in glass. I didn't need to rush it. A fracture left alone will always spread on its own. And while it did, I was already lining up my second strike, the one that would start costing him real money. The first strike rattled him. The second would make him bleed. I started with the debt collectors. I didn't just give them his address, I gave them his schedule. The exact times he'd be at his apartment, the coffee shop he favored, the parking lot where he liked to make private calls. I never lied. I simply made it easy for them to find him. Within a week, they were showing up in person. Once at his door. Twice at the cafe. The barista told me later he'd started ordering in a whisper, head down, as if that would make him invisible. But embarrassment wasn't enough. I wanted financial collapse. That's where the casino ledger came in. I'd pulled it from an old contact in the security department, a man who remembered Mark skipping out on a hefty marker years ago. I didn't need to forge anything, the truth was damaging enough. I sent the scans, anonymously, to the high-stakes players he still owed. Those men didn't rely on courts to get their money back. Next came his employer. Mark had always boasted about being too valuable to fire. I sent their HR department a polite, well-documented package showing how he'd been funneling clients toward side deals in exchange for cash under the table. That wasn't just a policy violation, it was a direct competitor to his company. 3 days later, he was placed on leave pending investigation. I knew because he called me that night. His voice was shaking, but not from rage this time, from fear. "Dad. I think someone's trying to destroy me." I kept my tone flat. "Sounds like you've made enemies." "This isn't funny," he snapped. "People are calling me. They know things they shouldn't." I let a beat of silence hang between us. "Then maybe," I said, "you should start wondering how they found out." By then, Claire's side of the story had taken root in her family's social circle. Mutual friends were cutting him off. His groomsmen, embarrassed to be connected to him, stopped returning calls. The wedding venue had even declined to refund his deposit after hearing why it was cancelled. Piece by piece, I was stripping away his armor. No club. No fiancée. No friends in high places. His income frozen, his debts in the open. And the best part? I hadn't even touched the worst piece of evidence yet. That would come later, when he still thought things couldn't get any worse. Mark had always been a fast talker. If you cornered him, he'd weave a story so quickly you'd forget what you asked in the first place. But pressure changes everything. By now, the pressure on him was constant, every door he knocked on shut in his face. Every friend he called asked if he was planning to pay them back. He started making mistakes. The first was obvious: he tried to reclaim control of the narrative. He told mutual acquaintances that Claire had overreacted to a small misunderstanding. That might have worked if people hadn't already seen the bank statements. His voice messages to her turned pleading, then bitter, then threatening. She saved them all. The second mistake was worse: he borrowed more money to cover the old debts. The kind of loans you don't find in a bank, handed over in cash by people who don't care about your excuses. I didn't have to interfere, I just made sure those people knew where he worked, where he lived, and that he was now temporarily unemployed. The third mistake was pure arrogance. He called his company's CEO directly, bypassing HR, and accused them of conspiring against him. He left the voicemail at 2 a.m. By sunrise, the CEO had forwarded it to legal, and legal had moved from pending investigation to termination effective immediately. Losing the job broke something in him. Not his pride, that was still there, twisted and loud, but his sense of untouchability. For years, he'd floated from one safety net to the next: me, Claire, his employer, his wealthy friends. Now, one by one, they were gone. I could tell because he started calling me. Not to apologize, never that, but to test the waters. "Dad, maybe we could meet up. Just talk." I kept my answers short, neutral, giving him nothing to grab onto. I wanted him reaching, because reaching leads to grabbing the wrong things. And he did. His next move was to try and liquidate assets. He listed his car for sale at half its value, hoping for a quick cash infusion. I tipped off the lien holder. They repossessed it before he could close the sale. He tried selling electronics, laptops, cameras, to a pawn shop. I made sure they knew the police might be interested in a few of those items. The shop refused the deal. He left empty-handed. By now, the circles of trouble he'd created were overlapping. Creditors were calling the people who had vouched for him in the past, dragging more acquaintances into the mess. Each new phone call was a nail in the coffin of his social life. One night, just past midnight, I got a text from him. "I know you had something to do with this. I don't know why." I didn't respond. Because soon, he'd know exactly why. And he'd have to face it in front of everyone he'd ever used, lied to, or left behind. By now, Mark was running out of oxygen. Every path he'd once used to climb out of trouble was sealed. I'd made sure of it. The country club still wouldn't take his calls. The job was gone, replaced by a growing list of legal threats. His friends had turned to ghosts. Even the people who owed him money stopped answering. No one wanted to be linked to his name. The final stage before confrontation wasn't about striking again. It was about closing every possible exit. I started with his rental. The landlord had been patient for years, tolerating late payments because Mark had a good job. When I showed her the employment termination notice, her patience evaporated. An eviction notice went up the same week. Then I contacted the lender still reviewing the fraudulent loan in Claire's name. I provided a sworn statement and a copy of her engagement records to prove she'd never consented. They didn't just freeze the account, they filed a complaint with the state's fraud division. Mark tried to fight it, but fighting takes resources, and resources were exactly what he didn't have. I knew his next move before he made it. He tried to run to family outside the city. But I'd already prepared for that. The relatives he called first were the ones I'd spoken to weeks ago. I didn't tell them to turn him away, I just laid out the facts and let them decide. None of them offered him a bed. Desperation was showing in every detail. His clothes looked wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He'd stopped showing up in public except when he had no choice. A man who once thrived on attention was now ducking behind tinted windows. That's when I gave the final nudge. I reached out to the biggest creditor he had, the one who could legally drag him into court the fastest, and told them exactly where to serve him. They were grateful for the tip. When the papers hit his hands, there was no hiding it. Court meant exposure. Exposure meant the last people still on his side would see exactly what he'd done. I didn't have to chase him anymore. I'd boxed him in so tightly that the only step he could take next would be toward me. And when he did, it would be on my terms, in my arena. The confrontation was coming. And this time, there would be no escape routes left to close. The first public crack came in the courthouse lobby. I'd positioned myself where I knew I'd see him, leaning casually near the security checkpoint, as if I just happened to be there. When he spotted me, he froze. His shoulders slumped for half a second before he straightened and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad," he said, walking over. We need to talk." It was the "we" that gave him away. Mark had never believed in "we." Only me. He tried small talk first, asking about my health, pretending to care. But after a few empty exchanges, his tone shifted. "Look, I know things happened. Mistakes were made. But this is getting out of hand. I'm staring down lawsuits, Dad. I could lose everything." I didn't respond right away. I wanted him to keep talking. People always reveal the most when they're trying to control the damage. "I just need enough to get the creditors off my back," he continued. "Bridge money. I can turn it around. You know I can." I let him ramble, every word dripping with the same false confidence he'd used on Claire, on his friends, on me for years. Then I asked the only question that mattered: "What's in it for me?" His eyes narrowed. "You're my father. Isn't that enough?" "No," I said flatly. The silence that followed stretched long enough for him to feel it. He looked around the lobby, as if realizing for the first time that people were watching, curious, whispering. That's when his desperation broke through the last of his pride. His voice dropped. "I'll sign whatever you want. Just, don't let me drown like this." I leaned in slightly. "You've been drowning for years, Mark. I'm just making sure you don't pull anyone else under with you." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Later that week, the unraveling went public. He showed up at a former friend's birthday party uninvited, demanding they vouch for him in front of their mutual acquaintances. Someone filmed it. The clip made its way online, Mark, red-faced and wild-eyed, shouting at people who turned away. In less than 24 hours, it was everywhere in our circles. The final shreds of his credibility burned up in that single, desperate display. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Everyone could see he was circling the drain. And the next time he called me, he didn't ask for money. He asked for mercy. He didn't call first. The knock came mid-afternoon, 3 short raps, a pause, then one more. Not the confident rhythm I used to hear from him, but hesitant, almost testing whether I'd answer at all. When I opened the door, I had to stop myself from showing surprise. He looked smaller. Not in height, but in presence. The man who once filled every room with loud words and bigger gestures now stood hunched, wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, a suit jacket wrinkled at the shoulders, a shirt missing its top button. His eyes flicked to the street twice before he even spoke. "Can I come in?" His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I didn't invite him with words. I just stepped aside. He shuffled in like someone expecting to be thrown back out. His gaze darted across the study, the shelves, the desk, the chair where I'd sat weeks earlier when I confronted him about Claire. I could almost see the memory playing behind his eyes. We sat. He didn't wait for small talk. "I'll give you my car," he blurted. "What's left in my accounts?" "Anything. I need you to help me." I leaned back slowly, letting the silence stretch. "Help you do what?" "Pay off enough to stop the calls. Buy me some time." My tone stayed flat. "Time for what? Another gamble? Another scam?" He flinched, but pressed on. I know I've messed up. I know he stopped himself before saying the word lied. But this is different. I can't keep up. I'm getting eviction notices, Dad. I haven't slept in 3 days. His hands were shaking, not from anger but from exhaustion, the kind that grinds you down to the bone. Who's after you? I asked. He looked down. Everyone. I opened the desk drawer and placed a single folder in front of him. I didn't push it toward him, just let it sit there like a weight. What's this? He asked. My terms. He hesitated, then flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page, and I saw the moment he realized what it was, a full transfer of his remaining assets into a trust under my control. Power of attorney over all financial dealings. Authority to approve or deny any future transaction he made. In simple terms, total control of his life's money. His head jerked up. This is insane. No, I said calmly, this is the only way you stop burning everything you touch. He scoffed, but it was weak. You're basically asking me to hand you my life. I met his stare. I'm asking you to hand me the wreckage. You've already destroyed the rest. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat. His hands tightened on the folder. If I sign this, I'll have nothing left. You'll have no more creditors banging on your door. No more loans you can't pay. No more chances to sink someone else with you. He sat there for a long time, his breathing uneven. I didn't fill the space. People reveal their truest selves when you let them sit in their own silence. Finally, he said, almost in a whisper, and if I don't sign? I leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. Then I deliver every piece of evidence I've gathered, the gambling records, the fraudulent loan paperwork, the testimonies, directly to the fraud investigators, the civil court, and every person you still owe. You won't just lose your assets. You'll lose your freedom. His jaw worked, but no words came. Then, slowly, like the fight had been scraped out of him, he picked up the pen. The scratch of ink on paper was the only sound in the room. His signature wavered halfway through, but he didn't stop. When it was done, he set the pen down like it weighed 100 pounds. I took the folder, slid it back into the desk, and locked it. That's it? He asked, his voice smaller now. That's it, I said. From now on, you make no move without my approval. You borrow nothing, sell nothing, promise nothing. Try, and I'll finish what I started. He stared at me for a long time. I don't know if he was searching for anger, pity, or forgiveness. He found none. For the first time since this began, I had full control. And for the first time in his life, he had none. After he left my study that day, the house was silent. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, the kind that feels final. The kind that settles over a battlefield when the last soldier realizes the fight is over. I watched from the window as he walked down the driveway. Shoulders slumped. Steps slow. No calls to make, no meetings to attend, no illusions left to sell. Just a man carrying the weight he'd spent years handing to everyone else. Control had been wrestled from him, but not with shouting, not with force. It was taken with signatures, paper, and patience. The kind of precision that leaves no mark except the absence of freedom. In the weeks that followed, I began the cleanup. I settled the most dangerous debts first, not to save him, but to keep the predators from circling close enough to cause more chaos. I sold off his remaining assets, piece by piece, with his reluctant approval. The car. The watches. The collectibles he once bragged about. Each sale was another reminder that nothing he'd clung to was really his anymore. Word of the wedding incident had long since finished spreading. Friends who once defended him now crossed the street when they saw him. The country club formally revoked his membership. The company's legal department sent me a polite note thanking me for cooperation in the matter. Even the gossip died down, not from forgiveness, but from disinterest. Mark became background noise in the very circles where he'd once been the loudest voice. And Claire. She sent me a handwritten letter. No flowery words, no gratitude speech, just, "Thank you for not letting me find out the hard way." She'd moved on, rebuilt her life in the space he once filled. I kept the evidence locked away. Not as leverage, I no longer needed it, but as a record. A reminder that people rarely ruin their lives all at once. They do it in steps, each one justified in the moment, until the ground gives way. Sometimes I wondered if he'd learn. If losing everything in such a controlled, deliberate fashion would force him to change. But the truth is, I didn't care. My responsibility to protect him had ended the moment he decided his lies were more important than the people who trusted him. Now, I protected others from him. And in that, there was a quiet satisfaction. Not the thrill of revenge, I'd felt that in the early strikes, but the colder, steadier satisfaction of knowing the damage was contained. He thought the wedding was the day his life fell apart. But really, it was the day I took the wheel. And I don't plan on giving it back.